So we're coming to you live. Good evening, everyone. We had the ice cream man driving down the street. There he is, the last remnants, live from Belmore, Long Island, on the back porch of Manhattan Edit Workshop President Jason Banke's house, where we've brought you the previous two Sight, Sound, and Story live events, and this is our third tonight. It's called Live from editor to producer. I'm sorry. Now, except the fact that I want ice cream, that's the only problem we're experiencing. No technical difficulties, but I wanted to welcome you. My name is Josh. I'm the founder of Manhattan Edit Workshop, and as always, we love to do events like these to get away from the tech and technology of editing and really talk more about the creative decisions behind it, the idea of creating a career out of it. And I hope that tonight's event will be a unique conversation that addresses that. And before we go into it, I would like to thank our sponsors, as always, Zeiss, OWC, Ace, and Shutterstock. And of course, Jason Banke, thank you for your home and the bug repellent, and Tristan Ledwidge and Janet Dalton over at the school, who are working the controls behind the curtain of Oz to make sure that everything is coming at you at the correct volume, the right aspect ratio. Any problems, there's a chat window for you over there. So let us know if you can't hear anything or see anything, and we'll try our best to fix it. There's always a little bit of a couple bumps in the road. This is new for all of us, but I think we're getting the hang of it. So I think the last thing I wanted to say was that we will be taking questions toward the end of the discussion tonight. But if you have a question during our panel, please put it into the chat window with your name if you'd like to be identified, and I will be taking these questions and I will be passing them along to our group, and they will address them at the end in the last couple of minutes or 10 minutes or so of the panel. So I've spoken more than long enough. I'd like to get my toasted almond bar now, so I'm gonna tune out, and I'm going to introduce to you Sean Weiner, Denise Davis, and I can't believe Daysha Broadway, whose name I couldn't see on the thing. So please introduce yourselves and have a great panel, guys. I'll see you in a little while.
Great, thank you so much. So thanks so much for having us here. My name's Sean Weiner. I'll be moderating the event. I'm just quick background on me. I'm from a place called the Jacob Burns Film Center and work to support emerging and professional filmmakers. And am incredibly excited about this conversation that we'll be having today with Denise and Daysha, who, if you guys could turn on your videos and your, oh, great, there's everybody. Hello, welcome.
Hello.
Hello, hey guys.
I felt very alone there for a second. Everybody's videos turned off, and then suddenly I was like, are they all, is this an elaborate prank?
No, Sean, we wanted you to have your moment, that's all.
Appreciate it.
This is you.
I'm going to just kind of run through a bit of an introduction for both of our guests, and then we're kind of going to get into, we have some clips to look at from Insecure and from a Blackley sketch show, and we'll talk a lot about process and things like that. But let me kind of run through who's with us. Daysha Broadway is a film and television editor who has over 10 years of experience working professionally in documentary, scripted and unscripted television. A Los Angeles native, Daysha obtained a master's in film editing from Dodge College of Film and Media Arts at Chapman University. Her credits include many TV shows, including Insecure, a Black Lady sketch show, 911, and the Lena Waithe produced 20s and Boomerang. In addition, she has contributed her talents to documentaries such as Light Girls for the OWN network and Surviving R. Kelly season 1 for Lifetime. Daysha has received 2 Emmy nominations for her editing on the A&E docu-series Born This Way. See, I was getting very monotonous, and then I just said something loudly, and it was like, whoa, suddenly I'm awake. Our other guest tonight, or today, depending on where you are, is Denise Davis. She is a television and film producer who got her start in the industry as a line producer for indie low budget projects, including music videos, short films, and digital content. In the web series realm, she is best known for producing Issa Rae's award-winning web series, The Misadventures of Awkward Black Girl. She is currently a supervising producer on the HBO critically acclaimed and Emmy-nominated comedy series Insecure, and a producer on Robin Thede Emmy-nominated HBO series A Blackley sketch show, both of which we'll talk about tonight. In addition to developing projects for Issa Rae Productions, she also serves as COO of the management company Color Creative, which provides access and opportunities for diverse and emerging writers. Originally from Las Vegas, Nevada, Denise is an alum of CUNY Brooklyn College and the American Film Institute Conservatory. So welcome to both of you. I guess it was good to read your bios. That's one way to introduce you. I hope that's okay.
It worked for me. It worked for me. I was sitting here in awe going, oh man, Daysha's done some stuff.
Right?
Okay.
Yeah, and I did not know you were from Las Vegas. We learned a lot today. All right.
Oh,
all right.
And I imagine our conversation will kind of go in all different directions, but you know, a lot of what I do is working with a diverse and inclusive kind of community of filmmakers and trying to change who's behind the camera and who's kind of changing what we're watching on our screen. So obviously, if we fall into those conversations, all the better. But I also am just incredibly excited about spending time just talking about your creative processes, how you know each other, and also kind of how producers and editors kind of interact as well. I think is always interesting. So I guess perhaps the dangerous first question, but maybe a good place to start, is understand kind of how you both kind of came into the roles that you're in now. You know, how you wind up in producing and how you wound up in editing in that way.
yeah, I love that you called it a dangerous question. It's
so dangerous.
You set us up
it
for
could
high
be
stakes.
a dangerously long answer, right? It could be like, and then we went
yeah. Well, I don't know. Daysha, is your story more dangerous than mine? Who wants to go first?
Yeah, I think mine might be. I think you should go first.
Okay, that's fair. Well, mine, unfortunately, maybe, or fortunately, mine is actually very short and sweet because producing is all I've ever done, which sounds very crazy to say because there's not a lot of people I meet who are just like, who want to be producers coming out of film school, but I was that kid. So I went to undergrad at Brooklyn College, as you mentioned. I got my bachelor's in film, minored in TV radio. But I decided to go to school for film because I got into video production when I was in high school. So that was actually my first exposure, and the things that I learned first about production was editing and a little bit of like directing, producing through our high school video program. So led me to film school where I got a very general education in filmmaking, and then knew early on, freshman year of college, producing was like the thing, you know, for me at least, and what I gravitated towards the most in terms of my interests and my passions. And so at the end of my 4 years, I decided to go to grad school specifically to learn more about producing. So that's how I ended up in LA, got into AFI where I got my master's in producing, was there for 2 years. And, you know, I took that leap of faith coming out of AFI's program and basically said, I can go be an assistant and work my way up 20 years and one day produce, or I just basically spent 2 years learning how to line produce and budget and schedule and oversee production and post. And why don't I just go and roll the dice and freelance and whoever would hire me who has a budget. So that's what I did. And that's actually how I met Issa and started producing her web series. And I was a freelance producer for 3 or 4 years, working with several amazing different filmmakers, mostly in the low budget space. And I did that until Insecure came along. And so, you know, the last 4 years of my life has been a different type of transition where, you know, I am an executive now at a company and developing projects while producing. I no longer freelance, thank God. But you know, that's the journey to where I am today. And so that's why it's like very straight and narrow, but I think it speaks to maybe the experience that I have in that this is like the only life I've lived and the only thing I've ever done. So, you know, I started pretty young and I love what I do. So that's my story.
And what was the, you know, what is that made producing kind of like a good fit for you? You know, what was it that sort of made you sort of switch to that pretty early on and stick with it?
Yeah, it's funny because I had a taste of it in high school. Once I started getting context in terms of like an education of like actually what those jobs were in a career sense, I remember being like, oh, editing. Oh, yeah, that's what that was. Oh, people actually do this. Yeah, I don't want to. Writing, that's great. Yeah, I don't have the patience. Like it was like me basically crossing off what I realized I had already kind of experienced and being like, that was fun, but no, like I had it in my head as like, if I had to do something for the rest of my life, which one would I choose? And so I quickly checked off the boxes of the things that I had experimented with and was like, that's not for me. And the one thing about producing that really stuck with me was that it happened to me, it happened to encompass everything that I loved about the process. Like I was like, I get to be creative, I get to be a part of production, I get to be a part of posts and the marketing and, and kind of oversee the entire thing. And there's no touch point that I think a producer is not involved in, right? So to me, it felt like I didn't have to just choose one thing. I can choose to be a part of the whole thing. And that excited me. In addition to just feeling like personality wise, I just felt like, oh, this is a natural fit, in terms of, I hate to say there's no real skill set in producing, but it's a different type or an editor would. And so that also fascinated me in terms of just a challenge of saying like, well, what does a producing career look like? And it's why I chose to go to grad school, just to say like, let me learn as much as I can, because I think it's a field, I think as a young Black woman too, that like, I didn't see myself in terms of mentors and other women doing it once I started to learn about it. And so I was just like, oh, well, maybe I should do that. Maybe I should exist because of that. So.
And it feels like, I mean, I think early on, especially in schools, a lot of times you have folks, everybody's identifying as a writer director kind of early on. And if you can recognize the different roles and kind of fall in love with a role that isn't exactly that, suddenly you're the most valuable person around, because everybody else is thinking, well, I'm the next this in this other way. And I feel like that's the same for editing. It's like recognizing that you're sort of in love with that. Suddenly it's everybody's looking for an editor, and maybe only one of us is identifying at that at the moment. But Daysha, if you could share kind of how you came to editing.
I actually went to undergrad as a computer engineering major, and so I've been a nerd since like day one. And I think like the first computer my mom bought me, I took apart and like tried to put it back together. So I thought that that's what I wanted to do. I thought I wanted to like delve more into that. So I went to undergrad for that, and then it was really just sort of pushing to the side the more creative spirit that I had, because I loved films. I loved television. I remember like Living Single changed my life, like when I was watching it and I like saw those women like doing this and like, and they were funny, and I had like not seen it done that way. And I was like, that would be really great. But then I thought I would just do the more practical thing, which I thought would, make me more money and get me out of my current situation. So I went for like computer engineering. And then I met people in school that totally changed my mind. It's different when you are around, more like-minded people. And I was taking like film classes, but it was very general. Like Denise said, it was just, film theory, no practical application. And if you ask my mom, a waste of money. But I had a great time, and I had come to understand what it was that I really wanted to do. But then was still too scared to do it. I knew it was editing too. I knew in undergrad, I was like, this is, it was a good mix of the technical and the creative that I was really interested in. And then, I took a year off after undergrad. I worked at my godmother's like paralegal firm, loved it. And then, then I decided, I was like, okay, I'm gonna actually go for this. And if I go for this, there's no looking back. It has to be a straight road. It has to be a focus on this, and it has to be a focus on editing, because like producing honestly is like wild.
So much
to
fun.
Me.
Come on.
It is wild. I could do that for 10 minutes and be like, okay, cool. Pass this right back to Denise, pass this back to Robin, pass it to Issa. No, but it's like, it's really, I thought it was really great. I actually liked the, like 3 or 4 times that I was directing a short, and I was like, this is great, but it wasn't the passion. I liked being the last writer of the script. So went to that, did undergrad, very or did grad school very unconventionally, got my first job by actually applying for it. And this industry is kind of unheard of, but I ended up assistant editing in reality TV at that point, and getting bumped up to editor 2 years later, and then just had like steamrolled into all these like editing gigs at this company, and then decided, like I said, I was watching Insecure and decided that I had to stop doing that. I had to work on Insecure one day. So if I'm going to work on Insecure one day, I have to get out of this situation and start making those steps to get there. So that's how I got to where I am.
It sounds like, I mean, one of the things, and I think this is often true when you're hearing reflections from folks who are kind of working on shows or working in films that you're kind of excited about and you'd love to work on that, you know, on that show, is a moment where you sort of say to yourself, like, if I'm going to do this, or if I'm going to get to that, I can't kind of take this traditional route. Or I guess not traditional route, but like there's a route that's kind of laid out there. And then there's the kind of decision to do something that feels like maybe a bit more of a risk, or kind of, for me, it feels like it's like identifying as a thing that you want to be, even if that means like it's low budget and there's no money there, but at least I'm the thing. Can you guys talk a little bit? I mean, I feel like that's a huge leap for folks, because sometimes people don't do that, and then you wind up, it's too long of a path if you take the one that's already, you know, laid out for you.
Yeah.
Or maybe
deep.
not. I mean,
Sean, that's
yeah,
deep.
listen.
No,
That's deep, bro.
I think we're done. I think this is over. Well, good night.
That was good. That was really good.
But also, you're like low key speaking my language, because I do believe. Look, I believe in the power of manifestation, right? And there is something to at least having your eyes on the prize of like, I know where I want to be. And the truth is, what I find most unique about everyone in the industry is that all of our paths are different, right? And so ultimately, the way people find themselves in that position that they want to be in is very different than how the next person found themselves, right? And so I always look at it as like the journey of opportunity, because for me, as long as I knew producing was what I wanted to do, I was taking every opportunity as long as it aligned with that, right? It wasn't like I was going to go and take something that was like what I felt like was going to get me off my path. And, you know, and there was those moments that now looking back, you can kind of look at that hardcore decision that was made that, you know, if you hadn't made it, it wouldn't got you to that next place, right? And it's always about that leap of faith, I think, in yourself, because you're like, I'm always gut checking, like, am I happy? Is this what I want to do? And if I'm doing it for someone else, then it's not going to get me to the end goal, right? And so the entertainment industry is just so wild, because like Daysha said earlier, like once you're in, you start to realize like, oh, this is how people get hired, or this is how this works. And there's no formula to it, right? And it's just this weird, like magical realm of like connections and relationships and people who identify with a certain craft that they're very skilled in. And, you know, it's about like, who knows you as that? And also, what are the steps that ultimately get you to where you want to be? So that's my long-winded way of saying, like, it's, I don't know, like for me, it's just always been making sure that I'm choosing to do the things that I want to do, and however that comes along, ultimately ends up getting me to where I want to be. But Daysha, I'm surprised you didn't talk about your transition, because I feel like that is big, in that so often, Sean, I'm taking over here. So often.
Do it. I'm drinking my water.
I was waiting. I was like, when? At what point does Denise take over? Yeah.
No, I mean, like, I want you to talk about it maybe with this question, just because I love this part of your journey, to be honest, which is, I think, so often what people end up doing. And as they get started somewhere, they start to feel stuck, right? And like you got started in editing reality, but you knew ultimately you wanted to do scripted, and you almost had to start the process all over again, you know, in terms of like, how do you, yeah, exactly. Right. And so many people are afraid to do that too, because they're like, I don't want to go back, you know, I don't want to start all over. I've reached this level. So anyways, I just feel like your experience in that, you could speak a lot about taking those risks and that leap of faith.
Yeah, no, I get a lot of assistant editors and people who just like email me and ask me the same sort of questions. It's like, how do I get in? How do I get out of reality TV if this is what I really want to do? And there is no real like cut and dry answer for me to give them. But I can say that, you know, my experience was like, yeah, I was cutting reality TV. I was doing really well at it. It got way out of hand. I got like nominated for Emmys. It was just out of hand. And I was like, this is either what I'm going to do. And because I'm I think of everything very practically. So I'm just like, okay, if this isn't what we want to do, you need to save up a lot of money while you're here doing it so that when you have to go back to assistant editing, you can afford the pay cut that's going to come with it. So I literally started like building these blocks in my head. I was like, okay, we're going to do this. So I spent like a whole year just like stacking money.
And then you don't want to be a producer, but okay, we'll get back to that.
I know. I didn't say I wouldn't be good at it. I'm just saying I could do it for 10 minutes and be like, I have a headache. But no, so I was like, I'm going to do that. And then I knew, like Denise said, it was a world of like who you know once you get past a certain like threshold. And then so I was like, okay, so I need to know more people. And I remember talking to my best friend as we were watching Insecure, and I was like, you know what it is? It's like I just need to sit down in front of someone and explain to them why I'm the one for this, because my reality TV resume might not tell them that. And so I need to be in people's faces. And so that's what I just sort of like set out to do after that. I was like, okay, now I'm just going to talk to as many people as possible, figure out how to talk to those people. You know, I was going to network events, collecting emails, finding anyone I knew. I knew someone, Ada Chiagana at HBO, who was a great friend of a friend. Talked to her. That led to like 3 other meetings, and then that led to me meeting Denise. But it was really just like a matter of like, because it was scary. You know, it's scary to leave something that's comfortable and getting you accolades and paying your bills, and you like the people you work with. It's very nice to go to work every day. It's very scary to just sort of drop that and go, you know, remember what the dream was and go chase that. And so that's the way I did it. And I also knew that because I had been editing for so long, that when I became an assistant editor again, I was going to make sure that I wasn't doing that for 5 years. I was like, I have to figure out a way, okay, I'm going to do this because this is what they say I need to do. However, I'm going to make it very clear to everyone I work with that I'm an editor, not an assistant editor, and I need to get back into that seat. And so luckily, in that sense, I worked really hard, and it didn't take long for me to get back to the cutting.
And that's, so you, at what point in Insecure do you kind of come on board? Is that for season 2, or is it?
No, I came on, me and Denise met like 3 years before I came on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
okay.
I was going to say, I want to say it was right after we finished shooting season 1. I feel like we met right around that time because you did Boomerang. No, you did 20s before.
I did 20s, the pilot,
So it was one of those things, once we had met and kept in touch, and you know, I like, as soon as I met Daysha, it was the same thing where it was like, I think of myself as a producer just also in life. And so when I meet great people and I'm just like, all my good friends who are in the industry need to know these great people, you know, I'm always, for whatever reason, people always come to me for recommendations. So I'm always like sharing the wealth of knowledge. And I shared, you know, I was like wanting to work with Daysha until I could, you know, kept introducing her to other filmmaker friends and people I knew who were in the same position as her. And so, it was just almost like we were waiting for the right thing to come back around. And then as luck would have it, within the same year, not only did Daysha get to come in for season 3, but also she was doing Black Lady Sketch Show around the time. It was just so funny how it was like, oh, we get to work together now on 2 things, which is great. It came full circle.
Yeah, and Denise, when the first time I met Denise, she gave me like really good advice that I had not considered, because I think, you know, very timidly, and people are concerned with relationships so much that they're afraid that they're bugging producers. And Denise, you know, just straight up told me, she's like, you are not going to be bugging me if you're emailing me like every 3 months, just letting me know how you're doing and what you're doing. And I kind of like took that with me with other people that I met. And because it is it's like a barrier. People who are just like getting into the industry are afraid of being that like nagging person to the point where it's not interesting anymore, you know? because you still want to be hireable and you still want to feel like people want to work with you. So that was some really, really great advice Denise gave me. And I did. I emailed her every 3 months and I was like, I'm doing this now. Now I'm doing this. Oh, I'm an assistant now. And now I'm like on 911. Oh, I just cut 911. Like, can I cut you? No. Like, yeah. So I was constantly doing that. Yeah.
No, but
I mean, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead, Sean. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that, you know, one of the themes emerging is kind of like the paying it forward element of it, you know, how quickly Daysha feels like you went from kind of receiving that kind of kindness from Denise to being somebody who's kind of like thinking about that with regard to, I'm sure, AEs and just like people that you're meeting who are now trying to walk through that door. You know, it's hard to get through it, and it's really important that folks are kind of guiding folks through.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and I was just going to add, like, you know, one of the reasons why I give advice like that is because as a producer, you know, I'm with any given project that's on our slate is always just moving, and it could be at any point of status, right? And so when someone's like checking in with you and keeping you updated on what's going on in their career, the minute that an opportunity could pop up, I'm not having to reach out 3 years later and going, what have you been up to? Can I put you up for this? It's like I can speak to someone's most recent experience based off of whenever the last time we touched base, and knowing that there's something that's right. And I think that's kind of actually what happened when was it 20s? Was that the first, or was it Boomerang? It was 20s.
That was the first one. 20s,
with Justin. Yeah, like, you know, Justin, who directed 20s, him and I went to AFI together. We're good friends. And, you know, he randomly reached out and was like, I need an editor. And I specifically want a Black female editor. Who do you know? And I think Daysha had emailed me probably not that long beforehand. And it was just like, oh, like she, at that point, you were doing the Netflix show. And so like, I knew she was at that point in her scripted career to be able to be eligible for something like that, right? If I had thought of her, if I hadn't spoken to her in 2 years and only thought of her still in reality, she wouldn't have come to mind. So I just think it's always important, like Daysha said, it's like you have to be using your network in that way, where I always say, it's like when you're meeting someone, it's not like you're asking for a job, you're literally asking, you're trying to get to know them. So that way they keep you in mind and they develop a friendship where they want to, at some point, work with you and keep in touch with you.
And that's like that's where obviously if you're the person doing the emailing, you think that you're being a pest or you think that you're emailing too often. But the reality is that, and it feels like this is a big part of this industry, is that if you can make something just a little bit easier for somebody else, it positions you in a really good spot, right? It's like you're looking for a place where the connections aren't happening. And Daysha was pretty much providing, you know, every 3 month quarterly updates on her resume, which is very helpful to somebody who hears a lot like, oh, I'm looking for an editor. You know, it's like, well, I've been getting these updates, you know, every 3 months. So I know exactly where this person's at. And so I can kind of vouch for them. I feel like they're ready. Okay, we have to look at clips. I feel like when we get to the questions, it's just going to be a whole bunch of like, why are they not showing clips yet? So we're going to do that. And I look forward to kind of like diving into it. And obviously, I think your relationship with one another kind of like we'll get at some really interesting insights into how producers and editors overlap. And you guys have selected the clips, so I'll sort of go to like, you know, well, why select this one? What's going on? And I have other questions because I get to ask all the questions if I want to. So let's start. We're going to look at a clip from Insecure, and the first few clips we're going to look at are actually from season 1. So at which point Daysha was was watching it on the screen like all of us, excited and wanting to be a part of it, and eventually became a part of it. So we'll sort of keep you updated on that as well. So let's check that out.
Offers after-school tutoring, mentoring programs, community service, standardized test coaching, big brother, big sister, and just general filling in the cracks. As youth liaison, I can assure you that whatever it is you need to succeed, we got y'all. So do y'all have any questions? Don't be shy, guys. Fire away.
Why you talk like a white girl?
You caught me. I'm rocking blackface. Any other questions?
What's up with your hair?
I don't know what you mean.
My cousin can put some tracks in it, unless you like it like that.
You rude. She African.
We're all from Africa, guys.
Absolutely. Let's stick to questions about the program.
Is this what you always wanted to do?
No, but I got this job after college and it fit my interest at the time.
Are you single?
I don't think that's appropriate.
Yeah, she's single.
Okay, since you guys are so interested in my personal life, here it is. I'm 28, actually 29, because today's my birthday. I came from a great family. I have a college degree. I work in the nonprofit world because I like to give back. I've been with my boyfriend for 5 years, and I did this to my hair on purpose. So I hope that covers everything. Does anybody actually have any questions about We Got Y'all?
Why ain't you married?
I'm just not, right now.
My dad said ain't nobody checking for bitter-ass black women anymore.
Denise, that's detention. Apologize now.
Sorry.
That's okay. And tell your dad that black women aren't bitter. They're just tired of being expected to settle for less.
Her outfit settled for less.
Okay, hey everyone. We are back. This is me sort of pretending like I'm a host. So we are back from that commercial break, from that clip break. So can we talk a little bit about why this clip was selected? And I've got some questions, but I'm sure you guys have reasons for sharing it.
Yeah. Sorry. What were the first couple clips? Just so I don't know.
Oh, I'm sorry. So we just looked at Issa in the classroom.
Oh, you looked at Issa in the classroom.
Yeah, and then it just came back to us. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, great.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. I've seen this show lots of times, so I was like, I didn't need to see it. Just tell me what it was. No, so I selected this clip because I distinctly remember this. This is from the pilot episode, obviously, which is shot separately from the rest of season one. Months before we shot the rest of the season. And one thing that stood out that I thought was important to talk about was just kind of how you craft the story. And Daysha said it earlier, which is like, how do you rewrite the story in post, right? And on the page, in terms of the actual pilot script and the way we shot it, this scene actually never started off the pilot script itself. This was actually a scene that came a little bit later in the pilot. I want to say maybe within page 3 or 4, to be honest. Like there was a couple other scenes that were the way it was written was supposed to introduce you to who Issa was in her world. And I remember when Melina and I were in the edit and, she was playing around with this, one of the interesting things was that we felt like the scene so clearly showed you the character introduction, the themes of the show of insecurities, and kind of also packed it in with a really big comedy like set piece of a scene, right? And to see the pilot, if I remember, to see it edited as written versus seeing how we ended up approaching it in its final edit, that scene says so much in so little time, right? It really does kind of knock you right into the world in such a way that you know immediately kind of what you're signing up for. Although it is a little disjarring because you're starting in classroom, and if you didn't read the log line, you might be like, is this a show about a school? Like, you don't know. But what you do realize is like exactly who Issa D is and what she's up against. And ultimately, as the pilot unfolds, I just always found it was such a beautiful, poetic way to, again, rewrite a scene in post that may not be as written, but when you play around with, what is missing or how do you kind of just get into something quicker, to us, that was the smarter choice. So that was the decision and why I wanted to talk about it.
And is that like, so when you're working on the edit, you're having a sense that this is working, right? This was the plan. We're looking at it as it was originally intended, and yet, you or the editor or whomever are sort of like, but something's just quite, we're looking for something else. Like, is there, and that creativity that happens when you just like start to break things that you kind of couldn't break and move them around in a way that.
Yeah, essentially. And a lot of sometimes it comes from pacing and tone, I think, too, right? And when those choices are being made, I think when you watch back at the pilot as edited or as written, those first few minutes felt slow. Like you were just like waiting for it to ramp up. It was a lot of montage pieces. And, by the time you got to the classroom scene, it felt like it picked up. And so it was one of those experiments, which is like, would it be crazy if you're starting with the classroom scene and we're just in it, and then reverse engineering the rest of the scenes that were the original introduction and playing around with how those were laid out. So, you know, it is a conversation, but what I found is that you still always start with the base. You almost still cut to script just to have that loose idea, because I don't think you can make those creative decisions until you see how it plays out, right?
Right. You don't want to kind of tear the whole house down and kind of build from nothing.
Exactly. Then if it's not working, then they're just like, well, did you try it the way it was supposed to be? And you know, until you can make that call, you know, you kind of have to see it that way first. And then you start to see what needs to be reworked, and you can play around with it. And at the end of the day, you still have it in its traditional form, but I think it still gives you a compass of sorts to follow and see where you can change certain things.
And Daysha, I know you didn't edit this particular scene, but just like in editing, just in general, I mean, is that maybe this is me kind of projecting what the experience of an editor is, but like, you know, you also want a map, right? You don't want to kind of be left kind of out to build entirely from scratch because you're working with a bigger team. And so it's like, you have to be able to say, well, we all agreed on blank, and then kind of adjust from there and kind of make your cases as to like why don't we try this, as opposed to, you know, them seeing something entirely new. Is that I guess I'm sort of suggesting, like, is that kind of like a common, or kind of what puts you or positions you in a place where you're able to make creative suggestions, but you're also able to kind of maintain a good relationship with the team, the larger team?
Oh yeah. No, I think it's very different from, you know, reality to scripted, because in reality I am just creating the whole thing myself.
Right. Yeah.
And then so that was a huge difference too, like going from one thing to the next, because in scripted originally the script is like the holy grail. I'm not gonna you know, chop it up too much until it gets to the point where we're like, okay, I have some ideas, you know. But yeah, originally it's the base. It's what we, you know, what I read before I came on. It's what I envisioned before I start cutting. It's what, you know, the director envisioned, the producers, the writers, everyone. So try to give them that. And, you know, sometimes you'll be cutting it and you'll be like, okay, this is every word in the script, but it's a little too long. And, you know, this scene can come down. It can pick up the pace a little bit. It gets, you know, especially in comedy, I'm like, oh, this would be funnier if she just didn't say this, if it went straight to this reaction instead and no one said anything, you know. So there's moments like that where you have those ideas, but I definitely don't, you know, I keep them in my pocket until that time arrives. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I love nothing more than when you go in and you watch something as an editor, like strung it out and put it together, and then you're just like, God, something's not working. And they go, yeah, I realize that. So I actually went and took the liberty of trying, and then you're like, and you watch and you're like, you're brilliant. Oh. It's like great editors wait for that moment that they can look like they're the heroes. And they're
just threw that in real quick. You know what? I had an idea. I usually have, like, I'll cut a scene and then I'll have a bin of other ways that I cut that scene. And then, so when someone's like, you know, it's really weird that she like does this, and I just go, there it is. Look at that. Yeah, but it's definitely like a moment of like, did that, you know, like, we're to save the day. That's what we do.
I do want to talk a little bit about just comedy in general, but you know, before that, like one thought is, you know, obviously what's on the page, and when you're reading the script, I mean, it's a different medium, right? Even if it's kind of text saying what the filmic experience is going to be like, it's still words on a page. And obviously when you go through production, you're so close to it and you're kind of thinking, yeah, that was a great take, like we got it. But like those decisions, I mean, that's why an editor's nowhere doesn't need to be anywhere near a set, because that's more like, oh, I actually felt good in this moment, like I'm not exhausted, so I think that was great. You know, it's not necessarily based on what actually appears in the video. So really, Daysha, your experience is kind of the first time seeing, at the risk of getting too poetic, like seeing kind of the flattened thing again that gets to get moved around in the way that a script got to be moved around, right? It gets to be kind of manipulated. It's not a bunch of people in a room with emotions and time restrictions and all of that. It's actually kind of a piece that moves at a certain pace. It's a certain, so it's just sort of interesting to, I don't know if I have a question here, guys. I think I'm just I'm listening to what you're saying, and it's really interesting to understand the kind of creativity that happens when the editor gets to look at that footage, and the fact that you kind of you do get to write a different version of the film, and sort of store it and show it when it's the perfect time for you to save the world. I am just interested, before we get to the next clip, we are talking about comedy here, and I think that choosing to get involved in editing or producing, choosing comedy is really specific. The people you're around, but also clearly in the editing, the pacing and the ability to have comic timing is in the performance, but also very much in the cut. But also just comedy in general is a thing that lets us through kind of laughing at things, occupy new perspectives, and laugh about something that otherwise we might just be scared to talk about, or might make us kind of freeze up. So can you just talk about, I mean, I don't know if it was an active decision to get involved in comedy, or if it was sort of something you realized you want to stay a part of, once you sort of fell into it, but the value of comedy, or why you guys sort of stay in that arena.
Interesting. Well, I can't speak to it from a technical standpoint. I just love stories. Like for me, it wasn't a specific, I guess, a priority for me to be in comedy. It just happened to end up there. And it's funny because when I look back at some of my music video works back in the day when I was producing, a lot of the stuff was like dark and dramatic. And I was like, whoa, like how did those are music videos. So anyways, it's just so ironic that here I am having done two completely different comedy series. And, but what I've enjoyed the most about it, and I think especially through the lens of Black women, to be honest, is that there is this relatability ethos factor when it comes to comedy storytelling that I think just allows people to feel good, right? And I like to feel good, and it's such easy viewing while also saying so much that I just don't think that we as a community so often get those perspectives shown and get to like show that side of ours, unless you're in the stand-up realm. Like, so I think from pushing the medium of like, what does it mean, even for a show like Insecure, like you kind of look at it as a dramedy in a way too. It's not, it really did kind of redefine another version of what a half-hour series could look like. And it's shown now in the DNA of all of these other comedy-led performer shows, right? The Fleabags, Atlanta's, Rami, Master of None, like you started to see this new type of comedy, to be honest. And what I do miss, I'm not gonna lie, is that I miss the old sitcoms. Like I could still sit here and watch and binge Cheers or binge Fresh Prince, and you see how the rhythm is just so different. It's so unique, I almost feel like I'm watching a live play with these performers and just like zinging them out. Whereas like, when we do something like Insecure, we're so specific about every little detail that it's like we're making art, like everything matters. So all that to be said, it's a long way of me saying like I didn't choose comedy just chose me. So there's that.
Ooh, mic drop. I like that. I wanted to do like action movies, fantasy, sci-fi. Like I said, I was a big nerd, so I was like that. Those were the type of movies that I was obsessed with. But then there was always movies that were being made about my community that I was also obsessed with. Like I was obsessed with Set It Off and Poetic Justice. And I was like, that would be really cool. And then, like I said, I loved Living Single. I loved seeing Black women be funny. Because I was also just the goofiest person. And I think that I went, because I started off in sort of a realm where we have to cut every type of scene. Like, you were cutting a reality show and you have to really cut this. You have to make something really dramatic that probably wasn't really dramatic. And then you have to like make someone funny who probably isn't really funny. And so you end up testing out a lot. Even on 911, you would cut a scene that's like this really big action scene. And then the next scene is everyone joking around a table and it's supposed to be funny. So I think that I got like a feel of how to cut a lot of different things very early, like right away. But I like to think that I have a pretty good sense of humor, and I think it shows in my editing, and I think I like know what's funny to me. And so it kind of informs the editing. And I know every time I like start on something that's a comedy, I'm going to be a little more entertained in my job. I'm going to have more fun doing it. I'm going to enjoy it because it's making me laugh. I get to make other people laugh, versus cutting a very like heavy documentary where I'm in there like actually just sad all day because of what I'm watching. You know, it's I like it a lot because it definitely, you know, sort of structures my day in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's interesting. One of the things that I sort of pick up from what you guys are saying also is this idea of, well, I guess I'm just sort of thinking about representation and how in really any marginalized community or community that wasn't represented in film nearly enough, you often saw what became almost tropes of like kind of tragedy or hard stories always, and it was kind of like and I know specifically I work with quite a few queer filmmakers who are kind of like, I'm not going to tell a coming out story, I'm not going to tell the story of a avoided hate crime or the experience of a hate crime. It's like I've seen that so much, and that felt like all of our cinema. So don't I get the opportunity to tell just a great story where it just so happens that this is who this person is, or these details are there, but let's just kind of like have a joyous story. Let's have a comedy. Let's expand this representation to be a myriad of experiences, just like any other thing that we've experienced in life, instead of sort of saying, a certain community only gets to have these 3 stories told about them. And I just feel like comedy is like it's sort of double-edged in that way, because it gives us the opportunity to laugh and just focus on things that and enjoy sort of the good stuff in that way. But it also, as somebody who like works for a nonprofit, like I watch Insecure and I'm like, it's just like there's so many things that are so perfect and would be so hard to say directly, and yet it's sort of being called out there, and it's actually giving the opportunity for an audience member who might have been in the other shoes of the character who's being critiqued to kind of see that from the outside and see themselves from the outside. And sometimes that's a really nice way to learn, instead of having to have a direct engagement that's a little harder. Like sometimes you can catch on there and say, maybe I'll change a little bit, maybe I should say that, and that's also great. And then the other thing I'll mention is that just talking about the sitcoms, Denise, like the idea, I feel like once we get to talking about sketches, we're going to kind of go back to that idea of like realism and filming things that are kind of nuanced and realistic in certain ways, and then what sketch gives you, where it kind of gets back to things that are a little bit more formulaic, but also gets so wild in their own way. But with that, we should look at another clip, and I'm going to move faster with clips from here on out. That's the deal. That's the deal I'm making with myself. So we're going to check out the clip from Insecure, Issa in the office.
My boss founded a nonprofit to help kids from the hood, but she didn't hire anybody from the hood.
I'm torn between the Booker T method and the Du Bois method. What would James Baldwin say is most beneficial for people of color?
In 2016?
I've been here 5 years, and they think I'm the token with all the answers.
Let's just ask Issa. Issa, what's on fleek?
I don't know what that means. I know what that shit means. But being aggressively passive is what I do best. I used to keep a journal to vent. Now I just write raps.
We are back. So that was just a clip of Issa in the office, which is... unlike the previous one, sort of introduces voiceover as a technique as well. But Denise, if you want to talk about why you selected that one.
Yeah, so I selected this because this scene is also at the top half of the pilot and getting you introduced to Issa's world. And one of the things I love most about this scene when you watch it, especially isolated, is that you realize that in another version, you can go right into like the talking mediums and going straight into seeing her boss and Issa and just doing, these back and forth conversations. But what we did was actually come in and still establish the world and the space to introduce you to who this boss was. So you're getting so much more from the story, not just from the dialogue, right? But actually seeing what's in the space and seeing this, absurd photo of her and Obama and the Beyonce poster and this, and, you within, I don't know, what is that clip, 30 seconds or less, like you immediately know who her boss is, right? You know exactly what type of woman she is, what she likes, like, and what Issa's up against. And then you have Issa's voiceover and the line of dialogue. And there's just these layers, I think, of storytelling visually that people forget of, like, showing how much you could show beyond what's written in dialogue, right? Like, so that way you're really front loading the scene, especially again, this is a pilot episode, so you're introducing an audience to these people for the very first time. So how do you give them as much information as possible in such a short amount of time, from knowing that the scene itself is only going to be this big in the longer context of the pilot. So that's what I love about it, because when I watch back, I'm just like, oh wow, we shot the hell out of that office, because there's so much B-roll to use, and halfway through the scene in the voiceover, you finally are actually in that moment with them, and it's just like a quick cut of this and this, but before that, it's all these shots of establishing her space. So that's why I chose that.
Yeah, and you point to a really interesting thing, which is how do you, the amount of work that a pilot has to do, right? Whereas like later, consequential episodes, you sort of know the world, so you can kind of not focus on those things. But how do we kind of get dropped into this world, but get introduced to enough elements that we can extrapolate and kind of catch up with it? So, I mean, I guess to you, Daysha, like thinking about, it sounds like editors often also are kind of like, you can do a lot in shorter stints than you might realize. It seems like a lot of, so in this example, there's a lot happening quite quickly, or a scene can be, I guess it's the idea of like things feeling kind of slice of life and like very, I don't know if vignette is the right word, but basically like we can see a very short moment and move on to another scene. And then suddenly there was a whole day that might have passed between those two cuts. And so we start to get a sense of like, there is a larger life here. This is just what we're experiencing of this full day. So how do you, I mean, do you often see things play, you sort of said this before, but things kind of could play much quicker, or like the ability to kind of accomplish what a scene might have had built out in a script in a only a piece of it, or something like that?
Yeah, no, editing is very psychological. It's there's like an art to the brevity, I think, and sometimes you will see something very quickly and not even realize that you saw it, and think about it like 5 seconds later and then laugh about it. So I think that those types of little like moments, I think, yeah, it's like you feel like you need to focus on this for this amount of time, but really you just need like this to like ingrain it into the viewer's brain, sort of, so to speak, and then you move on to the next thing. But it'll be there. It's so interesting how just showing a quick image can stay with an audience for the rest of the episode, and you feel like you need more, but you don't. You really don't. And oftentimes too, that limitation sort of makes you more creative, and it's like, okay, I only have this is going to be a 30-second scene. I need to figure out a creative way to get all of these story points into it. And the more creative you are, the better, the more better it is, the better the art is, I think, at the end of the day.
And that, I mean, the idea of the length of, I mean, how much is I guess it doesn't matter as much with something on HBO, but like, how much is the length of the episode kind of dictating anything for you? I mean, are you kind of seeing that this is actually longer than was originally intended, and then suddenly it's like, where can you start to make some of those decisions, or what's that balance?
Originally I don't think about it at all, and I just try to create the best scenes possible, and make them feel right and flow together, and make the whole episode sort of flow together. And then if it becomes an issue of like time, we need to get this down like 2 minutes or something like that, then I'll start to like look at like, do we have all the air out? Do we have like everything we need to get? Are we moving quickly enough through this moment to get to the point of the scene? That's when you start to sort of backtrack. And you might end up doing that anyway, like without the issue of time, just because you want to make sure it, like I said, flows the best way possible. So yeah, I think originally, editor's cut, I just try to get everything in that was intended. But also just make sure the pacing and the tone and everything is correct and feels good. And then we can think about time. I don't really think about it up front.
And to get like really kind of nerdy about your process, like even in the editor's cut, even early on, if you have a sense that there's a scene that actually could work as just a portion of it, I mean, you'll work that in. You'll sort of, I know oftentimes with editing, it's like your instincts, right? Your first impression is really important, because then you start seeing the footage again and again, and it kind of dulls the impact of it. So you're trying to remember, what was it like? Like, you might have laughed at something that might not have been intentionally funny on the page, but somehow something happened there and we want to use it. So what's your process?
Yeah.
Sort of you're looking or aware of those things, or kind of open to those moments?
Yeah, because I look at everything. I look at absolutely everything. There was a scene in my episode of Insecure where Issa was making phone calls and everything was hilarious. And I was like, that's problematic because now I need to make a decision. And so I will sometimes do this where I just like string out everything that I think is hilarious and then just play it over and over and over again, play it over and over again. I'm like, okay, which one am I still laughing at like this whole time around? And then that's the one that I usually use, but then keeping it like, marking and keeping in mind, like these were also great. This was also funny. This one felt different because of X, Y, Z. There's a different intention with this line read. It might also be funny in this situation. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely like, it's like you see the footage, you get the dailies, you're like, oh, great, this is great. Thank God they got this covered. this. But yeah, then you're just, it's picking and choosing and trying to figure out what's going to serve the story in the best way.
And it's like, I mean, the power in that's so kind of incredible to be like the first, the first audience member of the project, and to kind of be able to look at 5 different jokes and be like, that's the one I like. I mean, that's quite influential on what winds up being in the piece. So
and not
always,
yeah. Well, and I was gonna say, what I found about this part of the process the most interesting is because most people don't realize in the context of like television, what finally gets to air is that like the various cuts that are made, right? So the very first cut you ever see will be the editor's cut. So they'll be the first one who actually puts the episodes together, and that's what only gets sent to the producers, right? But then normally we're on set, we don't have time to watch the editor's cut until later, but we'll watch it usually very close to when we get the director's cut because they come so close together. And that's always like, to me, the biggest part of when the show starts to take shape, because what you see when the director comes in and those choices that they made, sometimes you do kind of have this gut instinct where you're like, ugh, but I liked it better in the editor's cut, or their instinct, they chose different takes, and it's interesting to then kind of keep having that callback, because then after the director's cut, there's a producer's cut. After the producer's cut, there's a network cut, right? So the editor's cut is the very first thing that anyone sees of the show. And it almost does, like, if you do it right, it is like the base that you kind of call back on. And some things kind of remain untouched, to be honest, once you get farther down the road, because you always will have that callback where you're like, oh, but in the editor's cut, we had that scene and I think this felt right. Or when we omitted this, I realize now when I got to the producer's cut, it's too long, or I don't miss that scene that we left on the table. So anyways, just the process of how it continues to go along. To me, the editor's cut is always my favorite, because it is, like you said, that first introduction to the episode that didn't exist before. And then the iterations that go along the way, it's so hard to discern them sometimes, because they will change a lot.
Sure. And I mean, it's just sort of, it's that first impression, which is really, I mean, it's really interesting to think about how multiple first impressions wind up kind of existing over the process. And there's no way you're going to forget the first time you saw it all put together. And so there's a lot in that. Cool. We should look at the next clip. And I think the next clip, it's Insecure, the parking spot clip. And this one, Daysha, is you cut this one together. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Great. So we will talk about your process right afterwards. So let's watch the clip.
Angry or unbecoming. It was that public judgment sweeps in to fill any void. If you don't get out there and define yourself, you'll be quickly and inaccurately defined by others.
Oh shit.
Friendships between women, as any woman
Oh
will tell
shit.
you, are small kindnesses like these.
I'm going. Okay. I thought you said you were going. I meant I was going. I'ma just suck around the block one more time. Michelle ain't become yet. Okay.
Bringing together old friends and new.
Okay. Hey everyone, we are back. I think my favorite moment in that clip is this, that happens with the woman in the, just that, because it's a moment where you do something that you actually like. This is such a like kind of non-aggressive thing to do, but you're feeling so much frustration. It's like one of the things that you would do, and then you'd be like, cool, nobody is catching what I'm feeling right now. It's like, no, we are so clearly catching what you're feeling. But anyway, it's a very quick scene, but to me it almost like it plays so clearly, almost like a sketch. It's like it's a full experience, and there's also, I mean, from a producing standpoint, but also from an editing standpoint, so many moving parts. I mean, literally moving cars. There's top-down shots. You've got a lot of different coverage on different. So again, I won't talk, Denise, if you want to, or if you guys want to talk about kind of why selecting the clip, and I'd love to know what your process was.
No, I'm not. That's all Daysha. I'm gonna let her speak to it.
Cool.
Yeah, no, I think I selected it because of all of those things. There was to me trying to attack it from the standpoint of like, okay, there's so much happening in this one scene. There's I can't find parking. I'm listening to Becoming by Michelle Obama. I find parking, and then my best friend comes and takes it. And then there's also the tension that's been building up from the past 3 episodes between these 2 best friends, and the fact that like they aren't, the whole scene is about the miscommunication that they are experiencing throughout the season, basically. So in my head, I was like, okay, there's all of that, but then also this has to be funny somehow. Like this, like this is, and it's thankfully, Issa and Yvonne give you so many facial expressions because there isn't much dialogue in the scene. And the dialogue that is there has to be able to be misconstrued by both of the characters. Like, so it was definitely a difficult scene to cut. I thought our director Nigel did a really good job of covering it, because in my head when I was reading it, I was like, how? Like, like just how? I was happy when I got the footage, because then I was like, okay, if we're shooting like through here, and then we're shooting through here, and then here, and then here, and these rear view mirror shots, it's like, okay, they can see each other. That was the main thing. I was like, they can see each other. It's clear whose parking spot it is, right? But what I was trying to do, I was like, it would be really cool if there was some sort of debate online after of like whose parking spot it was, because and the way it was shot, I was like sort of able to do that. But it was very much like, I remember being in the Bay with Issa and talking about it, and there was a moment of like, okay, Yvonne has these great reactions, one of them being the prayer hands, which to me signals that she actually loves Issa, because I'm trying real hard not to get out this car. And so I really wanted to put that in. I was like, that has to be in. There was like moments in the dailies where I was like, that has to be in, that has to be in, that has to be in. But Issa also wanted it to be very like, after a certain point, like it's just quick cuts. And because at that point, at the point where the pacing of the cuts sort of pick up, we know what's happening. At this point, it's no longer, we don't understand each other. It's, no, I'm taking this spot. Like that, at that point. So there was, a lot of it, like a lot of the story was just informing the way I was like sort of pacing the shots out. And then at the end, I really wanted to show Molly parallel park into it, just to be clear that she was being petty about it. Like she's doing the exact same thing Issa was about to do. So it's clear it was Issa's spot, But I was just, I was happy that we got those shots. Like it was I had a lot to choose from. And because I knew it was a scene about what wasn't being said, it was really great that, those 2 actors were, giving you so much here that I could cut to.
Well, you sort of speak to, I mean, there are 2 things there. One that is really interesting. It's like how close you need to be to the characters, how much you need to understand, the larger arc of the season, but also just what's going on in the characters, how they're feeling about each other, not only in general, but right now in the season, and how that then plays into the what is a pretty small moment, but it's so loaded with all this stuff, right? So I think that's really, I mean, it's just interesting to think about, just a sort of expansive thinking that everybody creatively involved in a project needs to be a part of, but how the editor thinks about that. And I guess the other piece that you mentioned was just reading it on the page. And it's like, you're not the cinematographer, you're not necessarily deciding the shots, but you know what shots you need. Like you're, or you're,
wanted.
yeah, or you know what you want exactly,
Yeah.
and how that kind of process works, where you sort of have a sense of what you're hoping to see on the other side of it. And
yeah, I actually drew this out as I was reading the script. I like took a piece of paper and I was like, okay, so then her car, and then she's gonna parallel into it. Oh, and then she's gonna. I was like, oh, okay. And so I was like, okay, I hope they get this. I hope they get this. You know, you kind of just sort of hope, but it's not up to me at that point. So I was just like, yeah. But
and I guess when you're sort of talking about like the rear view mirror shots, it's also that sometimes there's, you know, the added coverage, or what, you know, hopefully it's a team sport. And even though you're not there on set, hopefully they're also thinking, well, this is a pretty tricky scene. Why don't we get a little extra stuff here and there, because that might help.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes those conversations do happen early when there's a complicated scene, and just in terms of talking to the editor and the director or the producers, making sure that our plan feels right to the editor and that we're not missing something, right? Because like, especially in a scene like that, like, can you imagine the undertaking of having to go back and pick up a shot? Like, it's almost like, we got to get everything we need. And I always think about, to your point, Daysha, of like just the different ways it was covered. It's just like, you try to tell that same scene in a wide and a couple, like, it's just, it doesn't feel the same, right? Like, it's like you need the little beats and the different POVs really in order to craft the story in the way it's supposed to be told. And that was not an easy scene to shoot, like at all. I remember distinctly the day we shot that, because it was time consuming, and people forget all the layers in production with stunts and stunt drivers, and like, you know, and when the actors can actually drive versus when someone else is driving that you don't see. And so it takes a long time. And again, it's just like, you have to get everything in the can, so that way your editor's not mad at you later.
And also, I mean, I think we also see it. We see a scene like that. It's like, it feels so tame in the way that like it's just two cars like barely moving, but I mean, it requires the amount of work kind of is exponential there just the minute there's moving vehicles. So great. So I'm going to keep us moving along, because we're at 60 minutes. So we're going to go into the opening from Insecure, and then we'll talk about that quickly after. It's a pretty short clip. We're back already. I went to drink my water, and then I was like, oh no. But we're here. Denise, can you talk about why this was a sequence you wanted to share with us?
Yeah, so I wanted to show this. This is, again, from the pilot, just because I love the pilot. This is the very first opening images of the show, of the show Insecure period, right? And this was not in the script. And this was something that we felt like we really wanted to do to immediately put the audience in a sense of like place and location. And as you get to know the show, you start to realize just how integral Inglewood and South LA and this part of Los Angeles that up until this point never really got to be seen on television in a normal way. And so one, to have to take something and go shoot it and be like, we're going to go do a bunch of B-roll. And then it actually ended up doing enough where you're like, we want to do an opening montage. We put it in. And then what's also cool is I know, I'm sorry guys that there was no music in that. There is obviously music to that montage, but for the purposes of licensing, we had to pull it out. But on the on-air version, it's the Kendrick Lamar song, but I did also distinctly remember being in post on the pilot, and we went through quite a few different tracks actually to figure out what was the right song that packed the right punch when seeing these images that again puts you right into the sense of time and place. And that was super important because as you'll see throughout the series itself, we do a callback to this type of filmmaking or this type of imagery time and time again, right? Like it is almost a staple of what makes Insecure so different than another show, which is like showing these pops of our community and as is. And to me, it also makes the authenticity and the relatability of our characters and their conflicts that much more real, because you almost feel like these people actually exist in these neighborhoods. And, you know, so often in television becomes so insular that it doesn't show you the outside so much, right? And in our show, we purposely do that. So I thought this opening image was important because, again, it was made up on purpose, but I do think it was something that was successful. So.
Can I say, like, there was one thing that as an LA native and someone who grew up in South Central, the B-roll on the show actually added a layer to the characters for me, because I was like, Issa lives in Inglewood, Molly lives in downtown LA, and they still see each other a lot. I was like, that is love, that is friendship. That is care. And so, no, I always like, when I was watching the first season, I really loved and respected like how authentically it felt like the place that I grew up in. And it made me sort of add my own, you know, like pieces to these characters into the story. So it was always very cool like that.
It's interesting to also think about, I mean, I'm trying to make sure I don't like talk down to reality TV ever, but like to go from like kind of like nonfiction and which I feel like reality TV is not nonfiction and not fiction, it's something in between, but the idea, or maybe, well, anyways, different conversation. I guess what I'm trying to get at is like the ability to kind of like bring together kind of hybrid and put those things together and what they gift to one another. And Daysha, can you talk a little bit about like sort of that idea, right? It's like you're sort of trying to create a sense of reality, but of course, you know, Denise, as you were saying, like you don't want to feel too much in a bubble or almost too much like a sitcom, because part of what a show like Insecure is trying to do is say like, you know, you're kind of like, you're in the real world right now and you happen to be with these people, but all of this is also happening at the same time. So, you know, what is it like to kind of bring together things that are kind of narrative or scripted and nonfiction and see how they kind of charge each other? I don't know if that, that's me sort of presuming that that's something that editors are like, boy, I'm doing one of those things again. And then maybe it's not.
Yeah, no, I never really felt like it was that, because I think the way that we use those elements and unscripted is pretty different. I think you're just trying to get from one side of town to the next usually, or trying to orient the group of people you're about to watch. Versus I do think in shows like in Insecure, is like the city is a character in itself, and you really are using those images to ground you and ground the characters, and like and you know, passage of time and things like that. And it doesn't feel the same to me. It always felt like, okay, it's a part of the story. It's a part of these characters. So it always felt a little different to me.
And I guess
less
it's sort
formulaic, I think.
Yeah, I guess I'm sort of thinking about when you're taking kind of nonfiction footage and trying to turn it into something that plays really scripted in that way. It's a little bit of a different transition than like when you are making something scripted and inviting nonfiction. And it's almost like when you invite nonfiction and you kind of authenticate something further, right? Or you kind of let something have a multitude of dimensions in a way that you might not have been able to if you didn't invite that. Sure, Sean. Yeah.
No, I agree.
So we should keep looking at clips. So the next clip that we're going to look at is from a Blackley sketch show, and you know, of note, this is us kind of moving into thinking about sketch. And so we've been talking about realism, particularly right now. We're talking about how, you know, even nonfiction elements come in. So I'd love to sort of explore the kind of difference in approach to building out a sketch show. So let's look at No Makeup.
Hey, girl. 9:57 a.m. Again, Shayla. You know we started calling you Office Lauryn Hill.
Tony, I'm trying. It just takes so long to beat this face.
Then don't. Girl, you got melanin. You don't need NARS when you got skin like ours.
Okay, that's cute for you, Alicia Keys, but if I don't wear makeup, somebody always asks, are you okay? You look sick.
Oh, come on, it's not that serious.
It is that serious. Okay, last time I did not wear makeup. I got pulled into being a zombie on The Walking Dead. Of course, I did make $500, but it hurt my feelings. Did you get to meet Rick?
That's cool.
No, that is not cool, okay? I don't want people thinking I look like death.
Oh, well, it's better than looking unemployed. Ooh, Shayla about to get that job.
Look who's here before 9 a.m.
Well, goddamn.
Are you okay? Who did this to you? Yeah, I'm fine. I just don't have makeup on, okay? I told you. I knew you would do this.
Oh, but I didn't know. How could I have known? Who would have known? Oh, it was unknowable.
Well, at least I saved an hour getting ready. Besides, customers can't see me through the phone. Who cares? Millstone Coffee Company. How can I brew up an answer for you? Sure, let me place you on a brief hold. Girl, you ever steal coffee? I do. Okay, your shipment is on its way. Oh, talk to you later, percolator.
Oh, goddamn, Shayla. You look like you just walked out of an ICU.
Okay, now see, that's just how you see me. This is just my natural face.
Then you explain how that natural IV's hanging out of your natural arm.
There's no IV. Now, shh. I'm trying to do my work. I suggest you do the same. Millstone Coffee Company, have you been?
Oh, we came as soon as we could, baby.
Daddy's here.
Jesus, please save my friend.
Oh, Reverend, I'm glad you could come.
Back in. And so everybody just watched No Makeup from a Blackley sketch show. I would say, I would love to talk about escalation, but I'd also go to you guys to sort of talk about why you selected this one, why this was the one that you shared. But it just seems like it's so much fun with the escalation that happened.
Oh, I picked, that's right. Sorry, I'm all Denise. So this was, I think, the first sketch I cut out of, I think I cut like 25 of them or something crazy. It was also a really tight turnaround to cut it. And I got the footage and I saw all the reveals that Dime Davis, who directed it, had shot. And I was like, oh, we're going like full horror film. Like it just we have to just like lean into the horror. I asked my assistant Lilith to like start pulling all the like stings and like creepy like blood splatters and just everything. And I was like, I think what will be funny is the way this sounds. I think that's what I thought. I was like, this is, the half dead makeup, the, hospital gown, the Robin's acting, Gabrielle's acting was all like giving me what I needed to make it funny. But I was like, what's really gonna make this hilarious is kind of up to me at this point, because I was like, there's so many cool reveals that happen. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to hit each one with a sound effect so that every time that sound effect came back, you laughed at it, because it was that level of ridiculous. And the dialogue was great and funny, and I thought it was really good, but it was mostly just about hitting those reveals and making sure they were emphasized so that we knew like that was the joke. Like it was going to escalate. Every time you see Robin again, she's going to look worse, to the point where she dies. And it's just, I was like, yeah, it was like, this is probably, it was the most like, I think difficult up top, because it was the first one I cut, but it was also like the most involved. I had to like basically create this short film, horror comedy, and very quickly. And I'm actually pretty proud of it. So I thought I would show that.
You should be. It's one of my favorites.
I think, it's interesting to imagine, receiving that footage and sort of recognizing that, like, again, on the page that you can write an escalation all the way to whatever, and it like you can imagine it working. In person, you sort of produce it, but without the sound effects, without the sculpting that needs to happen, it sort of doesn't hit at all, right? It's just kind of like people doing more and more ridiculous things or creating more and more ridiculous images, but how do you kind of bring it all together? So it sounds like the stings and the music, and this I feel like is the first clip that we're looking at that is really kind of utilizing music in that way, kind of becomes like a glue in that. So I mean, if you could talk just a little bit about your kind of relationship with music, because I think music is this like incredibly helpful thing, but also like kind of, I mean, to bring back my dangerous adjective, but you know, like, you know, you always want to like make sure you're using music but not too much, right? Because it's a way of also showing a hand of how you're emotionally affecting folks.
Right.
So how do you play with those levels?
I always try to, like, the music to me has to be an aid to the scene, but it shouldn't be the scene, you know? In sketch, it's a little bit different because, like I said, I knew I was gonna lean so far into horror that the music was going to be a character itself. The music was going to also be a part of what's funny. And so it was about picking the right type of music that set a tone once things went absolutely wrong. Because at first it's just, you know, it's an office scene and she's always late, and you know, it's the music that really signals that things are changing, that something is different, something's awry. And then so it was about finding those right cues that made you feel like you were in a different space than what we started. And then just pulling sound effects to emphasize things. And I thought, you know, I think I used 2 or 3 different cues in the whole sketch. And I'm a very musical editor, so I'll do a lot of music editing myself. And because I was like, I know I wanted to do this and go up here and then come back down and then go up here again and then, you know, move here. And so I think I used about like 3 different cues and tried to make them all sound the same, but sound like they were rising and getting crazier and getting crazier. And then I don't think it's in the clip, but then there's a, you know, a next day moment where supposedly Robin's dead, and you know, her friend has gone to her funeral, and the music is completely different. It feels different, and then there's a twist at the end, and then that music comes back. So I knew I just kind of knew that I knew the music was going to inform the tone more than anything in this sketch versus some of the other ones that I had done.
Yeah, and I guess what you're saying is that it's sort of giving us a tone, but you're also creating kind of a cue and a memory, right, for us. So that basically you've kind of created a motif. It comes back, you're like, which is great. Cool. So let's look at our next, which I think is our last clip to look at, which is also from a Blackley sketch show, Bad Bitch Support Group, and we'll talk about that after.
Every morning, I wake up 1 hour early to put on my Fenty highlighter before my man wakes up. I'm exhausted, but I can't let Bae see me with my bare face, you know?
I've never been bare-faced in front of a man. I'm afraid all the athletes I date wouldn't know what to do with a woman who takes her cheekbones off every night.
Consider this. Do they even appreciate that you put them on in the first place? Moreover, is a partner who doesn't appreciate the cheek work deserving of the cheek twerk?
Never thought about that.
That's good. Sydney, just sleep in. Your face got this. The baddest I feel is when my man worships at the temple of my natural flat face.
I wish I could have a flat face all the time.
Girl, what? Tina, let Maya finish. Now, what's going on under that lace front of yours?
Well, sometimes I wish I was not a bad bitch all the time. Like, sometimes I wish I was just an okay bitch.
We don't use that type of language up in here, bitch.
It's just a lot of pressure. Like, I want to wear normal house slippers, not 3-inch heel house shoes.
Stop whining. Listen, being a bad bitch is an honor. We didn't choose this life. This life chose us.
Sometimes I just want to sit down for 5 minutes without wearing a waist trainer.
Oh, this hoe trying to take deep breaths?
Yes!
Breathe when you die, honey, okay?
Bitches, please.
So we are back in. I'm realizing that between these 2 sketches, kind of no makeup is like a theme, but that is not the truth of every sketch from a Black Lady sketch show. So that is a coincidence that just happened to happen with this curation. But if you could talk, I mean, all I want to talk about is like, how do you produce and like invite Angela Bassett to set and how do you manage that? And does everybody just act cool, and then suddenly everybody's not being funny because everybody wants to be cool and whatever. So, but I'd love to hear why you selected it. Just share it with us.
It's pretty much. Daysha, you selected that one.
Oh yeah, I thought you were going to talk about producing Angela Bassett. I was excited.
No, I couldn't muster up the words on set. I was very like, we have to be on our good behavior. So, with the exception of asking for a wide shot, but we won't go there.
No, that's not. I actually went to set for this one. I was there for like a half an hour, and I got to see. I was in Video Village, and I saw Laverne Cox's coverage. That's what I was there for. And there was a moment where she said, "Breathe when you die," and I just like lost it. I just fell apart, but made a mental note of like, "Breathe when you die" has to be in this sketch. Like when I had to go back to work and actually start cutting, no makeup actually. So I left set, but yeah, I picked this just because, it was difficult because it all is singles. There is reveals in the way that No Makeup has, and that you reveal that Angela Bassett is the one leading, this, but she has such a recognizable voice. If you are anyone who's ever watched anything, I think you hear her voice and you're like, is that Angela Bassett? So it was great. It was a great, like, cool reveal again, and I loved that. But it was a thing of like, some of the dialogue ended up getting cut out of this because it was, again, just a little bit too long, and it just played funnier, short and quick, and like just real snappy. And because we were going from like single to single to single to single to single, you really had to just keep going. And we couldn't use a wide shot because that was another reveal. The wide shot through the window was revealing that there were people watching this whole thing, and it's a great commentary on like Fashion Nova and things like that. So we couldn't use that. So it was very like, it was obviously awesome to cut. There was a lot of ad libs. I think even the clip that you showed, it's a lot of ad libs. So it becomes a thing of, choosing performance, which is such a big part of my job, and choosing which ad libs will serve the funny as much as possible. Laverne Cox kept making these like crazy noises when in her reactions to everything. She sounded like a zoo animal, and I just had like a bin of Laverne Cox noises at one point, and I was like, so whenever I need, because the other thing about it was it's not a sketch that's going to be musically driven, right? So there's music at the top, it cuts out, and then it's just about the dialogues, the pacing, the cut. And so I needed to fill that space with sound. I needed to keep it interesting and keep it like upbeat with sound, and so I added like their nails clicking, because I noticed everyone was wearing like these really long acrylic nails. And I actually had my assistant, I sent her like a YouTube link, and I was like, you see this girl doing all these things, like, click, 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 give me more clicks, click, 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 click. And she like sent me a whole bin full of nail clicks, and I like scattered them throughout the entire thing. So it was like nail clicks, Laverne Cox's crazy noises, Gabrielle's like squeaky voice. Like it was like, what can we like heighten so that there's no like dead space in this, because we are just watching single shots of people and their reactions. And then, I think at one point you just do a lot. I was like, there's so many reactions, and then you pull back. Okay, do we actually need this one here? Do we actually need this one here? Do we need this ad lib here? Is this one funnier? It's just, I think me, Robin, and Lauren Ashley Smith spent a lot of time going through that sketch in particular, going, okay, we have all these really funny ad libs, so at what point is it not funny anymore? And again, it's just brevity. I think one of my favorite characters on Insecure is Kelly, and I think it's because of the brevity of Kelly. Like I know everyone wants so much Kelly, and I'm like, no, like she's so funny because she's there and then she's not, like, like that to me. And so I think that those things in this sketch in particular were really important, because there's so many things you can miss because they happen so very quickly. But yeah, that sketch was interesting to cut. And I think most of what you see is like an ad lib or just like a funny thing that someone did that I just like threw in real quick. And I was like, I hope this is funny to everyone because it's funny to me.
And I would just like to add, I hope this shows everyone who's watching just how brilliant Daysha is as an editor, because the Black Lady sketch show is unlike any show in that it is, think of it as like, there's like 45 short films essentially that had to be cut. Like every single one, actually every single one except for Dr. Harissa, which was
who?
Whatever. I'm not gonna do it. She has too many names. But except for that one, which was kind of recurring sketch, and I feel like that might have been the only one that was recurring. And even that was a choice in post. But long story short, what Daysha's talking about in terms of the process of that particular sketch, that process was done again for every single one. And I think you said you did like 25 out of the 45 or 50 or however many we shot at the end of the day. And that layer of details, right, in terms of the music and the rhythm and the tone and everything, like had to be looked at scene by scene as its own thing, to be honest. But we went in purposely saying like each sketch is its own living, breathing story. And the other thing I think makes the show so brilliant is that also every sketch tonally is so different. Like she mentioned, the no makeup sketch has that horror comedy feel. Bad Bitch Support Group is a little bit more broader in comedy, but also I find it a little bit hood ratchet because that's the other part and purpose of it. But then there's like music, like straight musicals in the show too, right?
Yeah.
So every single sketch was just like you couldn't approach it the same way at all in the way that you normally would with a more linear narrative storytelling, like an Insecure, right? Like it's so important to keep consistency for a show like that, because the minute you have an episode that feels off, people can sense it. Whereas Black Lady sketch show, it was like every sketch has to feel like it's its own film, essentially. So
yeah.
And
we had the interstitials that kept it like, the interstitials made it feel like all like one cohesive thing. But yeah, every time you went to a different sketch, it was a completely different world, a completely different feeling. And yeah, it was definitely difficult to not get fatigue of that because there were so many sketches across 6 episodes, and I was cutting them pretty fast. So I would just take another one, do another one, do another one, do another one. But I also wanted to make sure I took my time with each one because, like she said, each one had its own world. And I wanted to make sure I gave it that. And it didn't feel like the one before. It didn't feel like the one coming after it. I think the only other reoccurring was Invisible Spy.
Yes,
in which, like we wanted it to feel like, and Invisible Spy is literally a spy film. Like it's actually
Invisible
a spy film.
Is like, it's the best.
Yeah,
honestly,
it is.
I've been thinking about it.
It's great. Yeah. No, but it was literally just cutting a spy film, and it was insane. I was cutting, and I was like, "Is this what I'm doing right now?"
Well, and that kind of like connects to where we started, where we're sort of talking about comedy, but kind of by way of sketch. Suddenly, you have all their challenges, but also I imagine it's really exciting as an editor to basically now I have to make every genre, right? It's like now you're kind of throwing formats and approaches to storytelling at me. It's just like, what did they think of? Okay, we're doing a spy movie, we're doing a horror film, we're doing this, and in each one there are different rhythms and ways in which those things move. And so even though they're 1 to 2 minutes, you're constantly positioned to say, okay, well, how does that type of a thing, like you're mapping it in some ways, but then of course you're trying to make sure it's funny, which is a different element that might not be inherent to the thing to what it's mapped to. Okay, we need to go to some questions. So that was all of our clips. I'm gonna read through. So folks had submitted some questions on Vimeo. The first one we have is from Alex, asking Daysha, how did you develop your own style as an editor, and how do you keep it fresh? Like how I said fresh there?
Ooh, yeah, I like that.
It's a choice.
It felt like a choice. Good one. I honestly just did it. It's the one thing I always tell people who ask me, like, how do you become an editor? How do you get good? You just have to keep cutting. You have to keep cutting as much as you possibly can. And in that you find your own style. You find what your instincts are, really. Some people naturally have great editorial instincts, and some people have to sort of find it, and so I think that I had some natural instincts, but then there were things that, every show that I took, I would learn something new and learn that I like to do something often. I would go, oh, you know what, I always kind of do that, and you don't really know until you just do it. And how do I keep it fresh? First of all, I hope that I do. Secondly, I'm constantly trying to improve. I think everything, what I love about editing is everything you get hired to do is going to feel different. You walk into this show, it feels different than the last, and you learn on every show. You learn on everything that you work on, and so I try to use those learning moments to improve what I do and see if I can try to change something that I'm getting bored with. Like if I notice I'm getting bored with something that I always do, I try to figure out a different way to do it, which is great, which is what I really like about my job, is I can change and evolve constantly.
Our next question is from Perry Pang for Denise. Was there something important you learned in the field that wasn't taught to you in film school? Just one thing.
What a question.
So good already.
Let me think. Oh, you know what I think is really important? That in film school, I mean, I'll be straight up. Most film schools, the process and the style of collaboration in terms of filmmaking is taught in the framework of a feature film. And what I realized, especially for someone who went from producing in digital low budget space straight to television, but I had web series, I didn't really know exactly how television and that process was done, right? You read about it, you're always hearing the writers are king, but like, again, from a film school context, they focus on, this is how you make a film, a short, which is very similar to the model as a feature, but you don't actually get to experience, especially as a producer, at least, and actually any other realm, what the pre-production, production, post, like what is that process? Because television creatively, and also from a production standpoint, the approach is completely different, right? Like it just is. The way you prep it is different. The way you shoot it is different. The way you're thinking about it is different, because you're telling almost a never ending story, right? And not a beginning, middle, and end. So I think that was the one takeaway for me in terms of like realizing between undergrad and grad school, it's like, we didn't really talk about TV, and we talked about it in the business sense, but like, you don't get the practical experience coming out of film school from when you do the shorts of like that mimics or is somewhat similar to what television is like. So.
So the next question is for Daysha from Miriam Velasquez. How do you convince someone looking for an editor that you're the right choice, especially in an interview or when reaching out to a producer?
Well, first of all, you have to believe it, I think. And I think the way you believe it is that you're actually passionate about doing that particular thing. If I'm up for something and I know that I'm not really in it, I'm not going to be able to pitch myself for it, It's easy for me to pitch myself to Insecure, It's like obviously I'm supposed to be doing this, here's why. And recently I've been reading some really great scripts, and some of them I'm like, these are really great scripts, I shouldn't be the one to do this. And some of them I'm like, these are amazing scripts, and like, this is me, and I think you have to feel it and believe it yourself first, and then do your homework on the people that you're about to meet with, note up the script as much as possible, have great questions that you want to ask, and have ideas about what you think this should look like and how you think it should feel. Basically show that you can and should, will do it correctly, I think, and do it justice, I think. But I think you can't do that. I think you can't present yourself that way if you don't actually feel it, if you're trying to go get a job because you need a job right now, I think there's a way to pitch yourself in that way, but I think, 9 times out of 10, if you are actually really passionate about it and you feel like you can do it, that'll come across in the conversations that you have with the producers or directors.
Great. Next question's from Braden French. I apologize if I said your name improperly. For Denise. For Denise, in your day-to-day as a producer, which parts of the job do you tackle on your own, and which parts do you delegate or manage a team on?
Fascinating question. I will speak in the context of some of the shows we talked about today, Insecure and Black Lady Sketch Show, just in the context of TV, because like I said, most people don't learn about it. With producing, it's almost as if there's multiple producers specifically for different responsibilities, to be honest, right? It's almost all delegation, because there's not anything, unless you're like the showrunner, writer, producer, who even then at a certain level can't really be involved in every single thing every single time. So there is a level of delegation across the board in terms of the different representation of producers and what their role is for that show. If I can speak to something like Insecure, my purpose primarily as a producer on that show is I'm so involved in pre-production, to be honest, because Issa and Prentice are on set 90% of the time, 99% of the time, unless Prentice is directing, and the writers are on set with them, and Melina might be in post. And so I am the constant producer that is always with our visiting directors on every single scout pre-production meeting, and everything that's involved before they get to set. I am their producer. So yeah, it varies, to be honest. And it's also why I love the role of a producer, because you kind of make it whatever is most needed for the project, to be honest. So, my role on Black Lady Sketch Show is very different than my role on Insecure. So that would be my answer.
Cool. And our last question for Daysha is from Kate D. Do you ever come across edits where you wish footage was shot a certain way and you don't have it? That's kind of a one-word answer, potentially.
Correct. Yeah, it happens. Look, it happens. There's a myriad of reasons why it happens. And at that point, it's like I said earlier, I think, sometimes your limitations will bring the creativity out of you, and you just have to figure out how to make things work. The idea at the end of the day is, whether or not all of the coverage you desired and think would work was actually acquired, you still have to make the scene work. You still have to figure it out. So, and a lot of times, it does make me get more creative and find different ways to tell the story that maybe I didn't think about before. It's like, no, if I only have this, wouldn't it be interesting if we did it this way? So yes, it happens.
Amazing. Okay, well, thank you guys so much for everything. So we have we've talked about the clips, we've answered all the questions. I want to share my appreciation for you guys spending all this time with us and for sharing your craft with us. And I also want to, I guess, kind of call back where we started off today, which was really talking about your guys' kind of working relationship and how that developed and how that provided opportunities. And sometimes it just really seems impossible to find your way into things. So I guess from a philosophical standpoint, just hopefully people watching kind of understand to lead with that. And that's kind of how we make this industry better. But I also appreciate you guys sharing your personal story and sharing that with everyone so that they have a reference point and know to just keep at it, because you find your way in, and if you treat everybody else well, people will treat you well. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
So true. Thank you for having me. Sean, thank you for being such a wonderful moderator. And Daysha, good to see you.
Yeah, Sean, you were great. It's great to see you.
Thanks, guys.
I was just in the dark there for a second. That was a great conversation. I was listening in the darkness, of course. It was really terrific. And, I should share with you what you did. You got the questions, of which you couldn't, unfortunately, we can't get to all, but there were so many great comments, shout outs, praise, laughing at the clips. So, I wanted to share that with you guys too. People were cracking up some of that material and really enjoying themselves. So thanks again for your time, your generosity, and a great panel. I'm going to close by saying our next event is October 14th. We're going to do a Sight, Sound, and Story on the art of sound design. So stay tuned for more information on that. Sean, Daysha, and Denise, thanks again for for your time, for a great conversation, and being part of Sight, Sound, and Story 2020 live, remote, the COVID version. Everybody real soon.
I love it. Well, thank you guys.
I got into sound designing at a point when things were just developing. I was really fascinated by the idea that dialogue, effects, music were all components of the soundtrack to a film, which had never occurred to me before.
My friends and I would make little videos in our backyards, imitations of Indiana Jones and Star Wars. Eventually that need to tell stories became more of a technical interest and an interest in the art.
I think what attracted me to color correction was the fact that we were like the next stage of cinematography. And the creative side was huge, trying to understand what was wrong with an image, how to balance it, trying to understand how to let the tools do what you want them to do.
To me, what's exciting is using cinema in its full potential, which is rhythm and sound design and music. Our job is to set up expectations and then deliver on them.
What gets me excited is coming up with sound ideas that do match picture, but also is not just the equivalent of what you're seeing on screen.
Where else can the technology go? What else can we do? I'm very interested in trying to mold the image and create the best look possible, and whatever tools are out there, you want to try and latch onto them.
I'm Brian Cates, and this is my course in film editing.
I'm Eric Whipp, and this is my course on color correction.
I'm Eugene Garrity, and this is my course on sound design.